Hello my friends, have you ever heard of a little old film called Starship Troopers? It's pretty over the top, but ever since I first watched it, I couldn't stop thinking about how similar the soldiers from the film looked to the Cadian soldiers from 40k. I'd wanted to create a little scene merging these both for a while now, and today we are doing just that, so let's get into it.
Swamp Rip. Miniatures.
Now I have seen you can buy miniatures of the bugs from Starship Troopers, but I thought I'd try to make my own, as I want it to be quite beefy and be posed in a way that will look natural with a cadian standing on its head blasting it to pieces. So after whipping up a little armature for its skeleton, I also created a quick display base from an old container and some XPS foam, then stuck the two together. This meant I could pose the armature so our bug would fit the terrain straight off the bat, instead of trying to do that with a rigid miniature later, and it also gave me a nice little handle for my sculpting work, which is always nice. And speaking of sculpting work, I'm doing my usual process for this creature today with an initial layer of green stuff and milliput to cover up the armature and get the most basic shapes popping like a weasel. In the second layer, I start getting a little bit more specific with my shapes, working out where some of the larger details are going, like some of these sections on the legs and around the mouth and whatever else. I wanted to build up quite a hefty chomper especially, like he's some kind of mutant beaver, bug, British person hybrid, so that definitely got some extra attention. And once it had all cured, I was ready for a final layer of finer detail work. I used green stuff on its own for this last layer, as it's more malleable than the mixture I used for the previous ones, which makes it a lot easier to sculpt in some of these little awkward tricky sections. And I'm starting around the legs where I overlap blobs of green stuffs on the upper portions to create a kind of insectoid exoskeleton vibe, then shaped in some stabby claw things on the end of each appendage. These especially were quite fiddly and annoying. I probably should have built them up in 2 or more layers to make the process a bit easier, but it, we're not here to be forward thinkers, we are here to sculpt alien bugs and fart into your nan's coffee mugs, so yeah. At this point I added a couple more globs of green stuff into the mouth to give it more of a gross and fleshy texture, which isn't really true to the film versions, but it's my own spicy little touch. Then I built up some kind of knee and elbow joint things on the legs to blend those armoured pieces together as well. For the final few touches, I stuck in some nice friendly pincer things into his almighty gob and a couple of happy little tendrils coming off the back of his body just like Mama used to have. This was followed up with some ridges along the tops of the upper jaw and torso to break them up a bit, and finally a little emerging eyeball that I stuck onto this side but not onto this one because I realised I put the arm appendage in a completely different position to the other one. Like all good problems though, we will find a way to cover that up later, or we'll just completely ignore it. Either way, our bug is now completed. He is looking a little bit rough around the edges. I definitely don't think this is my finest sculpting look, but I reckon I can make him look better in the painting phase later. So, onto Arcadian. I wanted to use an older, chunkier cadian for this boy, as the older sculpts look suspiciously similar to the troopers from the film, but I am sad to say that I have almost completely run out of my older cadian parts, which is a very depressing state of affairs as they're getting a bit harder to get hold of now, and I can't live without them. I'd had a good stash of them left over from older kits, but they've almost all been used in my various little dioramas and Swamp Hero Guard builds now, so I'm currently scouring the world wide web for affordable pieces whilst crying into my cereal, just to keep you all up to date with my woes. But anyway, I cobbled him together from new horrible monopose cadians, and I'd given him a few adjustments so he'd fit the pose I wanted standing on top of our buggy boy. He was looking a bit rough around the edges as well and a little bit gangly, but he'll do the job. And someone else who will do the job is me, if the job is adding more of a dynamic effect to our soldier, which I accomplished by adding a little shell ejection effect using some wire and snippets of styrene rod. This is to make it look like his lasgun is actually a ballistic weapon with automatic fire, spitting out casings faster than that one Eminem song. So if you were about to comment about how lasguns shoot lasers, not bullets, then just simmer down, have a biscuit and go sit in the corner. I also did a quick and easy muzzle flash on the end of the lasgun using a little bit of green stuff to amplify that effect further, and I reckon they combined pretty well in the end, so I was feeling quite proud of our little guy. This is where he'll be standing, but it felt rude to put in that extra effort with his weapon effect and not give some to Bugless too. So I rectified that by adding some nice explosive, fleshy, bloody acid chunks erupting out of where our soldier is dumping his mag. I've shown this stuff before, but it's basically just little melted nodules of plastic I make by dremeling on leftover sprues, and they get a really nice texture that works well for gory stuff once they're painted. So they're being put to good use again today as a visual representation of this bug getting his shit torn up. To get this baby ready for painting, I chucked on a bit of my homemade mud mixture to cover up all that foam, then slung on a mixture of rocks and fine, sandy, gravelly mixture to create a kind of rocky desert texture like from the film, sealing it all in place with some watered down PVA glue. I let that dry and we were good to go. I'm starting from the ground up on this paint job, going for a really quick and easy yellow sandy desert colour for the terrain with a standard base coat, wash and dry brush procedure. I got it looking decent, if not very basic, but I'll jazz that up a little bit more later on. Next up was the main star of the show with the big bad bug, and surprise surprise, I had no plans of how to paint this. I just knew I wanted to use a similar paint scheme to the film so it would stay recognizable, but give it a bit of my own personal touch to make it feel a bit more interesting. So instead of just doing yellow racing stripes over black, I did some weird sketchy kind of textured look across the body and some areas of the legs, which started to look okay but did strongly resemble a decomposing banana skin. I tried to clean that up a bit with a few different coloured glazes, which didn't seem to do much, and I was about ready to the whole thing off and repaint it, but thought I'd try one last hurrah with some little stippled yellow scaly dots on the torso. And this did seem to pull it back from the edge a bit. It looked okay, you know, not amazing, but okay, which is the high standard of quality we aspire to on this channel, so it, we're moving on. The black areas were next on my list, and I started building up some quite subtle highlights here, using a mixture of dark blues and greys, which worked okay on the leggy bits, but not so much on the upper torso. Luckily, my brain was firing like a well-oiled machine at this point, and I had an idea of glazing some reds into the mix here instead, which actually looked fairly good. It gave the bug a nice varied look at least, and didn't look massively out of place, so we're going with it. I then finished the claws and legs off with a final grey highlight and gave the mouth a pretty gross fleshy look using some blood effect paint and washes straight over the black primer, which again is not true to the films, but it's another little personal touch from me to the bug and into your eyeballs. The very final touches were some little highlights on the tendrils and pincer things, and there we have it, a little bit messy and a little bit different from the film versions, but not looking too bad all things considered. Now, onwards. The soldiers in Starship Troopers have these dark grey fatigues with an even darker grey or black colour for their body armour, so I'm doing something quite similar for this little cadian to stay true to the films and also as a fun little way to paint something different than our normal go-to cadian colour schemes. I was, however, instantly regretting gluing him down onto the bug before painting. I'm not really sure why I did this. I usually put them onto separate little painting handles, which makes it easier to reach all the little tricky spots without having to navigate around claws and appendages, but I did manage to muddle through though and got all the usual highlights and whatnot done, which made the fatigues look a bit too pale, but I sorted that out with a bit more glazing. I then hit the leather bits to make them pop, the black armour to give it a bit more definition, and finally the skin, which got a couple of highlight layers, just picking out some of the raised areas on the hands and face. The last details on our soldier were the aquila and the muzzle flash, which I painted using some orange, yellow and grey colours for a really quick and easy little effect. And then there was one area of the miniature that still needed painting, being these lovely erupting insectoid blood plumes. I hit these with a white overbrush first to give them the lighter undercoat necessary for making the acidic yellow-green blood colour really vibrant and eye-catching, and I hadn't planned to do this beforehand, but after adding the blood colour, I started kind of building up a dirty OSL effect in the surrounding areas as I felt they weren't complementing the blood as much as I'd hoped, and this was another choice that I was regretting immediately as it was looking really shit for the most part. I think I was quite tired at this point because my brain just couldn't comprehend where I needed to be placing the colours to make it look at least kind of semi-realistic, but I was able to pull it back a little bit towards the end, so it didn't look so bad. And I did a very subtle effect on the soldier also, just to seal the deal. So in the end, it was still quite janky and over the top, but then again, so was Starship Troopers, and now I feel like I should have just lied and said this shoddy paintwork was an artistic meta-commentary tribute to the Starship Trooper aesthetic, but it's not, it's just a subpar glow effect, so yeah. Anyway, with that, my friends, all that was left to do was add a few little desert plants to enhance the terrain and chuck on a bit of this deserty basin mixture that matched my earlier paint job surprisingly well. And it was now time to see how it all turned out. So there we have it, my friends. Not too shabby all in all, and I think the inspiration is still pretty obvious despite me giving it some of my own personal touches. There are a lot of areas on this I would like to improve for next time, mainly being that glow effect, so if you can just all go ahead and never mention that again, that would be great. But yeah, when I remind myself that this is an alien bug I've made completely from scratch, it all feels a little bit better at least. I'm probably going to go sit in a dark room and watch Starship Troopers again now, as there's a pretty good shower scene you should check out if you haven't already. Alright, yes. And if you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe or leave a like or a comment to let me know what you liked about this build and what I could have done better. And also let me know what your favourite type of moth is. Check out my Instagram if you want to chat or see my builds while they're in progress. And as always, I have been your friendly neighbourhood swamp rat, and I will see you very soon in another video. See ya.